stood outside apartment 712 with $500 bills in my trembling hand, just like I had done every single month for the past 3 years. My mother-in-law Diane opened the door just wide enough to snatch the money through the gap without even looking at my face. "Thank you for honoring your son's debt," she said coldly before slamming the door. My son, not my husband. As if I wasn't his widow. As if I hadn't buried him with my own hands. As if the color of my skin had always made her question whether I was ever really family. I turned to walk away, my heart heavy with grief and resentment, when Mrs. Chen from apartment 611 grabbed my wrist. Her eyes were wide with fear. "Stop giving them money," she whispered urgently. "Go downstairs right now and ask the building manager to show you last night's security footage." Trust me, what I saw on that screen 20 minutes later made my blood run ice cold. Because the man walking into Diane's apartment at 2 in the morning, using his own key, moving with that familiar limp I'd recognize anywhere, was my husband. The husband I'd buried 3 years ago. The husband whose funeral I'd paid for with money I didn't have. The husband for whose debts I'd been sacrificing every spare dollar while raising our daughter alone. Daniel was alive, and he'd been living upstairs the entire time. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. My name is Lauren Mitchell. I'm 36 years old, a black woman living in Portland, Oregon, and for the past 3 years I've been living in a nightmare disguised as grief. I work as a nursing assistant at Mercy General Hospital, pulling double shifts whenever I can because single mothers don't have the luxury of saying no to overtime. My daughter Emma is 8 years old, with her father's pale skin and my dark curls, and she's the only reason I'm still standing. When Daniel died, or when I thought he died in that warehouse fire 3 years ago, I was 6 months pregnant and barely keeping our heads above water. Daniel had been a contractor, good with his hands, but terrible with money. He'd borrowed $15,000 from his mother Diane to start a renovation business that never quite took off. The terms were informal, just a family loan, pay it back when you can. But when the fire department called me to identify what they said were his remains, when I stood in that morgue looking at a body burned beyond recognition, when I signed the papers and watched them close the casket, everything changed. At the funeral, Diane pulled me aside, her face hard as stone despite her tears. Her pale blue eyes looked right through me like they always had, like I was something temporary that had attached itself to her son and now needed to be dealt with. "My son owed me $15,000, she said, her voice dripping with the same cold politeness she'd used since the day Daniel brought me home to meet her 12 years ago. "He's gone, but the debt remains. You're his wife. His responsibility is now yours. I'll expect $500 on the first of every month until it's paid in full." I should have fought back. I should have told her that legally I wasn't obligated to pay my deceased husband's personal debts. But I was drowning in grief, overwhelmed with medical bills from Emma's birth, and desperate to keep some connection to Daniel's family for my daughter's sake. Emma was going to be biracial in a world that was already complicated enough. I didn't want to take away her white grandparents, her connection to half of her heritage, even if those grandparents had never fully accepted me. So I agreed. For 3 years, I scraped together $500 every single month. I skipped meals. I wore the same 3 outfits on rotation. I walked 40 minutes to work in the rain to save bus fare. I watched Emma wear shoes 2 sizes too small because I had to choose between new sneakers and making that monthly payment. And every month, Diane took that money with the same cold expression, never inviting me in, never asking about her granddaughter, never showing a shred of the warmth she'd once shown me before Daniel's death. Though if I'm being honest, that warmth had always been paper thin, a polite veneer that barely covered her disappointment that her blonde-haired, blue-eyed son had chosen to marry a black woman. The apartment building where Diane lived was in North Portland, a 6-story complex built in the 1970s with narrow hallways and paper-thin walls. I lived on the 3rd floor. Diane lived on the 7th. The cruel irony of paying rent in the same building where my creditor lived above me wasn't lost on me, but the rent was cheap and I couldn't afford to move. Mrs. Chen, the elderly Chinese woman from the 6th floor, had always been kind to me, often watching Emma when I worked late shifts. She'd known Daniel when he was alive, had watched him come and go from Diane's apartment during family visits. She'd also witnessed the way Diane treated me, The subtle digs, the cold shoulders, the way Diane would smile warmly at white neighbors while barely acknowledging me in the hallway. Mrs. Chen never said anything directly, but I saw the sympathy in her eyes. Which is why, 3 days ago, when she saw something on the building's newly installed security cameras, she knew she had to tell me. The building manager, a grumpy white man named Ron who'd installed the cameras after a series of break-ins, was reluctant to show me the footage. "This is private property surveillance," he grumbled, barely looking up from his computer. "I can't just show it to any resident who asks." "I'm not any resident," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm asking you to show me footage of the 7th floor hallway from last night. Please." Something in my face must have convinced him because he sighed and pulled up the footage on his ancient desktop computer. The timestamp read 2:14 a.m. The 7th floor hallway was dark except for the dim emergency lighting. And then he appeared. A man in a dark hoodie, jeans, and work boots, walking down the hallway with a distinctive limp, favoring his left leg just like Daniel always had after his construction accident 2 years before his death. The man was white. I could tell from his hands, from the brief glimpse of his neck. The man didn't knock on apartment 712. He pulled out a key, unlocked the door with the ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times, and disappeared inside Diane's apartment. "Show me the footage from other nights," I whispered. Ron pulled up footage from a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a month ago. Same man, same time, same key, same apartment. "How long have these cameras been recording?" I asked. 6 weeks, Ron said. "Ever since we installed them." My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of Ron's desk. "That's Daniel's walk," I said. "That's his exact limp. He injured his knee on a job site, and it never healed right." Ron looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, your husband died 3 years ago. You sure you're not seeing what you want to see?" His tone had that edge I'd heard 1,000 times before, the subtle suggestion that maybe I was being emotional, irrational, seeing things that weren't there. "I'm seeing what's actually there," I said, meeting his eyes directly. "And what I'm seeing is that the man I buried wasn't my husband, that I went home and pulled out every document from Daniel's death." The fire department report said that on March 14th, 2021, a warehouse fire in southeast Portland had killed 2 people, one of whom was identified as Daniel Mitchell based on his work truck being parked outside and his wallet found near the body. But the body itself had been burned so badly that DNA identification wasn't possible. Dental records were used instead. I'd been so overwhelmed with grief and pregnancy that I hadn't questioned any of it. I trusted the authorities. I trusted Diane when she'd helped handle the funeral arrangements, when she'd taken charge of everything with the efficiency of a woman who wanted control. I trusted that the closed casket I'd wept over actually contained my husband's body. Now I questioned everything. I called my friend Jessica, a white woman who worked as a paralegal at a law firm downtown. We'd met in a support group for young widows and had bonded over late-night phone calls and shared grief. "Jess, I need to ask you something insane," I said when she answered. "If someone faked their death, how would they do it?" There was a pause. "Lauren, what's going on?" "Just hypothetically," I pressed. Jessica sighed. "Hypothetically, you'd need false identification, a body to take your place, or convincing enough circumstances that a body wouldn't be questioned, cooperation from someone who could verify the identification like a family member, and a reason compelling enough to abandon your entire life." "Like debt?" I asked quietly. "Like serious debt," Jessica confirmed. "We're talking about Daniel, aren't we?" I told her everything. The security footage, the limp, the key, the timing. When I finished, Jessica was silent for a long moment. "Lauren, if Daniel is alive and he's been hiding in his mother's apartment while you've paid off his debt for 3 years, that's fraud. That's conspiracy. That's a dozen felonies. And," she added carefully, "given how Diane has treated you over the years, I wouldn't put it past her to exploit you specifically because she thought you wouldn't fight back." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I already knew. Jessica hesitated. "I mean that Diane has never treated you like family. She's never treated you with respect. And I think she chose to put this financial burden on you because she assumed a young black widow with a baby would be too scared, or too proud, or too desperate to question her. She saw you as easy to manipulate." The words stung because they were true. "But I need proof," I said. "Video of someone who might be him isn't enough. I need irrefutable evidence." Jessica thought about it. "His fingerprints would still be in the system from his contractor's license." If you could get something he touched recently and have it compared to his prints on file, that would be definitive. Or, she added carefully, you could confront him directly. Get him to admit it on recording. That's incredibly dangerous, Jess. I know, she said. Which is why I think you should go to the police. Not yet, I said. If I go to the police, and I'm wrong, I look like a delusional widow who can't accept her husband's death. And let's be real, a black woman accusing a white family of fraud without ironclad proof isn't going to be taken seriously. If I go and I'm right, but they don't have enough to arrest him, he'll run and I'll never get answers. I'll never get my money back. I'll never get justice. Jessica was quiet because she knew I was right. In a perfect world, the police would investigate fairly regardless of race. But this wasn't a perfect world. I need to be sure first, I said. That night, I went through our old photo albums, studying Daniel's face, his posture, his hands. I compared them to freeze frames I'd secretly taken of Ron's security footage. The build was right. The height was right. The way he held his shoulders, slightly hunched from years of construction work, was exactly right. I was 99% certain. But I needed 100%. The next morning, I called in sick to work, dropped Emma at school, and positioned myself in the lobby of our apartment building with a clear view of the elevator and stairs. If the man in the footage was Daniel, and if he followed any kind of pattern, he might leave during the day when he thought it was safe. I waited for 5 hours, drinking coffee from a thermos and pretending to read a magazine. At 2:30 p.m., the elevator dinged. The doors opened, and out stepped a man in a baseball cap, sunglasses, and a surgical mask, wearing the exact same hoodie and jeans from the security footage. He moved with that familiar limp toward the exit. My heart stopped. I waited until he was outside, then followed at a distance. He walked 3 blocks to a bus stop, never looking back, completely confident in his anonymity. When the bus arrived, I got on 2 doors behind him, keeping my face turned away. He rode the bus for 20 minutes into Southeast Portland, got off near a Home Depot, and walked into the parking lot where he climbed into an old white pickup truck. I'd already taken out my phone and was recording everything. I zoomed in on the license plate, the truck's make and model, the dent in the rear bumper. And then, before he put the truck in gear, he pulled off his mask to wipe his face with his sleeve. I saw him. Full face. Clear as day. It was Daniel. My husband. The white man I'd fallen in love with despite his mother's disapproval, despite the stares we got in public, despite the complications. The father of my biracial child. The man I'd mourned for 3 years. He was alive, healthy, and apparently making runs to Home Depot while I worked myself to exhaustion paying his debts. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run to the truck and pound on the window and demand answers. But instead, I took a deep breath, stopped recording, and got back on the next bus home. Because I didn't want answers. I wanted justice. And justice required a plan. I called Jessica from a park bench near my building, my hands still shaking with rage. I saw him, I said. It's Daniel. He's alive. I have video of his face. Oh my God, Jessica breathed. Lauren, you need to go to the police right now. Not yet, I said. I need him to confess. I need him to admit what he's done on camera, and I need to know why. Why he did this. Why he let me suffer. Why he abandoned Emma. Why he let his mother treat me like garbage while I paid her every month. Jessica tried to argue, but I cut her off. Help me or don't, but I'm doing this. After a long pause, Jessica said, okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to wire yourself with a recording device. You're going to confront him somewhere semi-public, so you're safe. And you're going to get him to confess everything. Then we go straight to the police with the confession and the video evidence. Where, I asked. Where do I confront him? Jessica thought about it. His mother's apartment. Next time you go to make a payment, bring the recording device. If he's there, force the confrontation. If Diane tries to stop you, push past her. You have a right to be in that hallway. You have a right to demand answers. And Lauren, she added, her voice fierce, you are not the one who should be ashamed here. They should be. What they've done to you, it's not just fraud. It's cruel. It's racist. It's exploiting your grief and your desire to do right by your daughter. Don't let them make you feel small. You're the strongest person I know. I spent the next 2 days preparing. Jessica got me a small recording device disguised as a pin that I could clip to my shirt. I practiced what I was going to say, how I was going to stay calm, how I wasn't going to let emotion derail me from getting a full confession. On the 1st of the month, I withdrew $500 from my account like always. But this time I also withdrew another 500 as backup. I dressed in jeans and a jacket with the recording pin clipped to my collar. I told Emma I'd be home late and arranged for Mrs. Chen to watch her. And then I climbed the stairs to the 7th floor, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I thought about all the times I'd made this climb. All the times I'd handed over money I couldn't afford to give. All the times Diane had taken it without a thank you, without inviting me in, treating me like the help rather than her daughter-in-law. All the times I'd swallowed my pride because I thought it was what Daniel would have wanted. Well, Daniel was alive, and he was about to face the consequences. I knocked on apartment 712. 3 sharp knocks. Diane opened the door her usual crack, the security chain still on. Her thin face appeared in the gap, her pale eyes looking me up and down with that familiar mixture of judgment and disdain. "You're early," she said coldly, holding out her hand for the money. "I need to come inside," I said. "No," Diane said. "Give me the money and leave." "I'm not leaving," I said louder. "I need to talk to you about the debt. About Daniel." Diane's face went pale, her hand trembling slightly on the doorframe. "There's nothing to discuss," she said, trying to close the door. But I shoved my foot in the gap, holding it open. "Either you let me in or I call the police and report fraud," I said, my voice steady despite my terror. "Because I know Daniel is alive. I know he's been living here. And I know you've both been scamming me for 3 years." For a moment, Diane just stared at me, her face frozen in shock. Then, from somewhere inside the apartment, I heard a man's voice. "Mom, who is it?" My entire body went cold. That voice. I knew that voice. "Let me in, Diane," I said quietly, "or I start screaming and wake up the entire floor. And I promise you, a black woman screaming in this hallway will get attention. People will call the police. And when they get here, I'll show them everything I have." Diane's hands were shaking as she unhooked the security chain and opened the door. I pushed past her into the apartment. The living room was dark, curtains drawn, smelling of cigarette smoke and takeout food. And sitting on the couch, wearing sweatpants and a stained t-shirt, a beer in his hand, was Daniel. My husband. The white man I'd loved. The man I'd buried. He looked older, thinner, with a beard he'd never had before, but it was unmistakably him. His pale skin looked even paler in the dim light, his blue eyes wide with shock as he stared at me like I was a ghost. "Lauren," he said. His voice was hoarse. "What are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" I repeated, my voice rising. "What are you doing here? You're dead. I buried you. I paid for your funeral. I've been paying your mother $500 a month for 3 years while you've been sitting here drinking beer and hiding like a coward." Daniel set down his beer and stood up slowly, favoring that bad knee. His mother moved to stand between us, but I held up a hand. "Don't," I said to Diane. "Don't you dare try to protect him right now. You've done enough. You've taken enough from me." Then I looked at Daniel, and all the pain and rage and exhaustion of the past 3 years came pouring out. "I've been paying your mother $500 a month for 3 years. $500 I didn't have. $500 that could have bought food for your daughter, clothes for your daughter, a decent life for your daughter. And you've been here the whole time, living above me, watching me struggle, letting your mother treat me like dirt every single month while I handed her money I could barely afford to give." Daniel's face crumpled. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. "Lauren, I can explain," he started. "Then explain," I said. "Tell me why you faked your death. Tell me why you let me grieve you. Tell me why you watched me struggle and did nothing. And tell me why you let your mother exploit me when you have always known, that she never accepted me, that she never thought I was good enough for you because of the color of my skin." Daniel looked at his mother, then back at me. His face flushed red. "That's not fair, Lauren. My mother she never treated you differently because of race." "Don't lie to me," I said sharply. "Not now. Not after everything. I'm done pretending I didn't notice the way she looked at me, the way she talked to me, the way she made it clear from day one that her white son had made a mistake marrying a black woman. The only reason I tolerated it was because I loved you and I wanted Emma to know her family. But you don't get to stand there and gaslight me about your mother's racism on top of everything else you've done." Diane's face went red. "How dare you come into my home and accuse me of such things," she started, but I cut her off. "Shut up," I said. "You don't get to talk. You've been stealing from me for 3 years. You've been cashing checks and taking money from a woman you never respected, a woman whose grief you exploited, whose financial desperation you used to your advantage. So sit down and be quiet while your son explains why he destroyed my life. Daniel sat back down on the couch, his shoulders slumped. The warehouse fire was real, he said quietly. 2 people really died. I was supposed to be there that night for a job, but I didn't go. I was at a bar, drinking, avoiding going home because I knew I was drowning in debt, and I couldn't face telling you how bad it was. How bad? I demanded. The $15,000 from your mother? Daniel laughed bitterly. That was just the beginning. I owed $15,000 to my mom. Yeah, but I also owed $30,000 to a loan shark for gambling debts. I'd been betting on sports, poker games, anything to try to make quick money. I was in deep with dangerous people, Lauren. People who were threatening to hurt you and the baby if I didn't pay up. When I heard about the fire, when I heard that 2 bodies were unidentified and one of them was near my truck, I saw a way out. My truck had been stolen 2 days before. I'd reported it, but I guess whoever stole it took it to that warehouse. When I heard about the fire, I called my mom and told her what I wanted to do. Diane interrupted, her voice defensive. He was going to die anyway if those loan sharks found him. At least this way he could disappear and you and the baby would be safe. We were protecting you. Safe, I shouted. You think we were safe? You think forcing me into poverty while you hid like a coward was keeping us safe? You think making me work 60-hour weeks and walk miles in the rain and skip meals was protection? I turned back to Daniel. Keep talking. Tell me everything. Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes. Mom knew a guy who worked at the medical examiner's office. Someone she'd helped out years ago who owed her a favor. He made sure the identification went through as me. Used my dental records, my wallet that I'd left in the truck before it was stolen. It wasn't hard. The bodies were so badly burned that no one questioned it. And just like that, I was dead. And what? I demanded. You just decided to live here in secret? Forever? Daniel shook his head. The plan was for me to hide out for a year, maybe 2, until the loan sharks gave up looking for me. Then I'd move somewhere far away, start over with a new name. But I couldn't get work without identification. I couldn't risk being seen. I became a prisoner here. And the debt payments, I asked, my voice breaking. Why make me pay you back if you were already hiding? Why torture me like that? Why target me specifically? Diane answered, her chin raised defiantly. Because we needed the money. Do you think it's cheap keeping a grown man hidden? Feeding him, clothing him, paying for everything he needs while he can't work? Your $500 a month kept us afloat. And let's be honest, she added, her voice dripping with venom, you owed us. My son married you against my advice. He had opportunities with nice girls from good families, but he chose you. And look where it got him. Hiding. Broke. Ruined. So yes, I took your money. I took it, and I'd do it again. The room went silent. Even Daniel looked shocked at his mother's words. So that's what this was really about, I said softly. You blamed me for Daniel's choices. You blamed me for his gambling, for his debts, for his problems. And when he faked his death, you saw an opportunity to punish me. To make me pay, literally, for the crime of being a black woman who married your white son. Diane's face was cold. Think whatever you want. It doesn't change the fact that you owed a debt. Daniel finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. Mom, stop. Just stop. He looked at me, tears in his eyes. Lauren, I never wanted this to happen. I never wanted her to treat you that way. I thought you'd move on. I thought you'd be okay. You thought I'd be okay, I screamed. I worked 60-hour weeks. I've been eating ramen for dinner so Emma could have real meals. I've been walking miles in the rain to save $2 in bus fare. And you thought I'd be okay? I loved you. I mourned you. I cried myself to sleep every night for a year. And Emma, I continued, tears streaming down my face now. Your daughter, your biracial daughter who you've never even met. Do you understand that? You have an 8-year-old daughter who doesn't remember your face because you abandoned her before she was born. She asks me why her skin is darker than the other kids at school. She asks me why her grandma Diane never wants to see her. And I've had to explain, over and over, that her daddy died and her grandma is just sad. But that was a lie, wasn't it? Her daddy didn't die. He just didn't want us. Daniel stood up, reaching toward me, his face wet with tears. Lauren, please, I never wanted. Don't touch me, I said, stepping back. Don't you dare touch me. You don't get to cry and apologize and make this about your guilt. You made your choice. You chose to disappear. You chose to let me suffer. And worst of all, you chose to let your racist mother exploit me while you did nothing to stop it. Then you should have come back, I said. You should have faced your debts like a man. You should have fought for us. But you didn't. You chose to be a coward. And you chose to let your mother's prejudice poison everything, including your daughter's life. I reached into my jacket and pulled out my phone, holding it up so they could see the screen. I've recorded this entire conversation, I said. Every word. Every confession. Your mother's admission that she exploited me. Your admission that you faked your death. And I have security footage of Daniel entering this apartment. I have video of his face from 3 days ago. I have more than enough to send you both to prison for fraud, conspiracy, and probably a dozen other charges. Diane went white. Daniel sank back onto the couch, his head in his hands. You can't, Diane said. Please, Lauren, think of Emma. If you send Daniel to prison, she'll know her father is a criminal. If I do nothing, I said coldly, she grows up thinking her father was a hero who died tragically instead of a coward who abandoned her. And she grows up believing that it's okay for people to exploit her because of her race, because of her background, because she's vulnerable. At least the truth, no matter how ugly, is honest. And at least justice, no matter how painful, is fair. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Portland police, the operator said. I need to report a fraud case, I said, keeping my eyes locked on Daniel's face. My husband faked his death 3 years ago and has been living in hiding while I paid off his fraudulent debts. I'm a black woman, and his white mother has been exploiting me financially for years. I have video evidence and a recorded confession. I need officers sent to this address immediately. The operator asked for details, and I gave them calmly, mechanically. Diane started crying, begging me to reconsider, saying I was destroying the family. Daniel didn't move, just sat there with his head in his hands. When I hung up, the three of us sat in terrible silence, waiting for the police to arrive. They're going to ask you why you didn't come to them sooner, Daniel finally said. I'll tell them I needed to be sure, I said. I'll tell them that as a black woman accusing a white family of fraud, I knew I needed ironclad evidence, or I wouldn't be believed. I'll tell them I needed answers first. And I got them. Daniel looked at me with something that might have been admiration mixed with despair. You were always stronger than me, he said softly. Yes, I said. I was. And that's why I survived this. That's why Emma will survive this. Because we're fighters. And you're just a man who ran away. The police arrived within 15 minutes. 2 officers, 1 white and 1 black. I showed them the recording device, the video footage from the building's security cameras, the video I'd taken of Daniel's face at the bus stop. I gave them copies of everything. The black officer, a woman named Officer Williams, listened to my story with increasing anger on her face. And they made you pay for 3 years, she said, while he was living right upstairs from you. Yes, I said. The officers arrested Daniel and Diane both on charges of fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and making false statements to authorities. As they handcuffed Daniel and read him his rights, he looked at me one last time. Can I at least see her, he asked. See Emma? Before they take me away? No, I said. You lost that right when you chose to disappear. Maybe someday, after you've served your time and proven you're capable of being a father, we can talk about supervised visits. But not today. You don't get to waltz back into her life just because you got caught. And honestly, I'm not sure I want her anywhere near your mother, given what I now know about how she really feels about us. The officers let him out. Diane was crying hysterically, begging me to drop the charges, to think of the family, to remember that we were all Christians and Christians forgive. I ignored her. Christianity doesn't mean being a doormat, I said. And family doesn't exploit family. Over the next 3 months, the legal case progressed quickly. Daniel pled guilty to avoid trial, accepting a sentence of 4 years in prison with possibility of parole after 2. Diane pled guilty to conspiracy and fraud, receiving 2 years probation and a court order to repay me every cent I'd paid her plus interest, $18,000 total. The court put a lien on her apartment to ensure payment. I also filed a civil lawsuit and won a judgment for emotional distress damages, another $25,000 that would likely take years to collect, but felt like vindication nonetheless. The story made local news briefly. White man fakes death. Mother exploits black widow for years. And for a few weeks I was semi-famous in Portland, recognized in grocery stores and at work. Most people were sympathetic, especially other black women who understood exactly what I'd been through. Some white people thought I should have forgiven him, that I was being vindictive, that I was playing the race card. I didn't care what they thought. The support I got from my community, from other black mothers, from women who'd been exploited and dismissed, and told they were imagining prejudice that was very real, that support carried me through. With the court-ordered repayments and the money I was no longer sending to Diane every month, my financial situation improved dramatically. I was able to move Emma and myself into a better apartment in a safer neighborhood with better schools. I started putting money into a college savings account. I bought Emma new clothes and enrolled her in the art classes she'd always wanted to take. One afternoon about 6 months after Daniel's arrest, I received a letter from him. It had been forwarded through his lawyer. I almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single handwritten page. "Lauren," he wrote, "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to ever let me see Emma or be part of your lives. I just want you to know that everything you said was true. I was a coward. I was selfish. I destroyed the best thing in my life because I was too afraid to face my own mistakes. You deserve better. Emma deserves better. And you were right about my mother too. I've had a lot of time to think in here, and I've realized that I let her prejudice poison our marriage from the beginning. I should have stood up for you. I should have defended you. I should have cut her off the first time she made you feel less than. Instead, I made excuses. I looked the other way. And when I faked my death, I let her exploit you in the worst possible way. I'm using my time in here to get clean, to go to therapy, to try to become someone worthy of asking for a second chance, even though I know I'll probably never get one. Please tell Emma that her father loved her, even though he failed her in every way that mattered. I'm sorry doesn't even begin to cover what I feel, but I'm sorry anyway. For everything. I hope you and Emma have a beautiful life. You both deserve it. Daniel." I read the letter twice, then folded it, and put it in a box of Emma's things I was saving for when she was older, for when she inevitably asked questions about her father. She deserved to know the truth, all of it, the good and the bad. But not yet. She was too young. For now, I told her that her daddy had made some very big mistakes and was away learning how to be better. I told her that sometimes people we love make choices that hurt us, but that doesn't mean we're not lovable. I told her that her skin was beautiful, that being biracial was a gift, that she carried the best of both worlds inside her. And I told her that no matter what anyone else said or thought or believed, she was perfect exactly as she was. Mrs. Chen asked me once if I regretted turning Daniel in, if part of me wished I'd just confronted him privately and walked away. I thought about it carefully before answering. No, I said, because if I'd just walked away, he never would have faced consequences. Diane would have kept that money. They would have gotten away with it. And Emma would have grown up learning that it's okay to lie, to cheat, to exploit the people who love you as long as you don't get caught. Worse, she would have learned that as a black woman, she should accept mistreatment quietly, that she should let people take advantage of her, that she should be grateful for crumbs. I couldn't teach her that lesson. What lesson did you teach her? Mrs. Chen asked gently. I taught her that the truth matters, I said. That justice matters. That even when it's hard, even when it hurts, you stand up for yourself and you demand accountability. I taught her that love isn't about blind loyalty, it's about respect and honesty. I taught her that her race doesn't make her less deserving of fairness or dignity. And I taught her that her mother is strong enough to protect her from anything, even from her own father and grandmother. Mrs. Chen smiled. That's a good lesson. The best one, I agreed. On the first anniversary of Daniel's arrest, I took Emma to the coast for the weekend, something we'd never been able to afford before. We built sandcastles and ate ice cream, and stayed in a little motel with a view of the ocean. Watching her run through the waves, her caramel skin glowing in the sunlight, her curls bouncing as she laughed with pure joy, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Daniel had stolen 3 years of my life with his lies. His mother had tried to break me with her cruelty and her prejudice. But I wasn't going to let them steal anymore. I was done being their victim. I was done carrying their burdens. I was done sacrificing myself for people who'd never valued the sacrifice. Emma ran back to me, her hair full of sand, her cheeks pink from the sun. Mama, can we come back here next year? She asked breathlessly. Yes, baby, I said, pulling her into a hug. We can come back every year if you want. We can do anything we want now. She squeezed me tight, and in that moment, I felt the last piece of the weight I'd been carrying lift off my shoulders. I thought about the woman I'd been 3 years ago, broken and grieving and desperate. I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, discovering an impossible truth and finding the courage to confront it. And I thought about the woman I was now, standing on a beach with my daughter, finally free. The past couldn't be changed. The damage couldn't be undone. But the future was mine. Ours. And that was more than enough. If you're watching this and you're in a situation where someone is exploiting your grief, your loyalty, your love, I want you to know something important. You don't owe anyone your suffering. You don't owe anyone your silence. And you certainly don't owe anyone money for debts that aren't legally yours, no matter how much they guilt you or manipulate you or claim it's what a good wife or daughter or son would do. And if you're a person of color being exploited by people who've never fully accepted you, who've always made you feel like you had to prove yourself, who've used your desire to be accepted as leverage against you, please know this. You don't have to earn basic respect. You don't have to tolerate racism disguised as family dynamics. And you don't have to stay silent about mistreatment just to keep the peace. Check the laws in your state. In most places, you are not responsible for a deceased spouse's debts unless you co-signed for them. You are not responsible for a parent's debts unless you explicitly agreed to take them on. Companies and family members will try to make you feel obligated, but obligation and legal responsibility are two very different things. And if you suspect someone in your life is lying to you, trust your instincts. Look for the evidence. Ask the hard questions. Don't let anyone convince you that you're crazy or paranoid or playing the race card for wanting the truth. The truth might hurt, but lies hurt more in the long run. They fester. They poison everything they touch. Sometimes the people we love the most are capable of hurting us the deepest. That doesn't make us fools for loving them. It makes them wrong for betraying that love. You are not responsible for other people's choices, only your own. And choosing to stand up for yourself, to demand honesty and accountability, to protect yourself and your children from exploitation, that is always the right choice, no matter how hard it is. 3 years ago, I was a broken woman being slowly crushed under the weight of a lie. Today I'm free. And if I can do it, so can you. Thank you for watching my story. I hope it helps someone out there find the courage to seek their own truth and their own justice. You deserve better than being someone's victim. You deserve a life built on honesty, not deception. Don't settle for anything less.